Hello, this is John Nance with Altronic. In today's video, we're going to teach you how to calibrate an Altronic 0 to 5 volt pressure transducer. Before we get started on the calibration process, I want to review real quick what an Altronic 0 to 5 volt pressure transducer is. An Altronic 0 to 5 volt pressure transducer uses 3 wires. We have our voltage supply wire, which is a red wire, and this is where the pressure transducer receives a constant, steady, true 5 volt supply. We have a black wire, which is connected to ground, and it can be grounded at the actual channel that it's associated with, or in a lot of cases, if you have an Altronic panel, the ground wire will be grounded to a common bus that has one wire but ties to this, what we call the A common ground terminal. And you can see the little ground symbol right here on the DE-3000 board. The last wire is white, and it carries the actual variable voltage signal back to the associated channel. Now, we call this a 0 to 5 volt pressure transducer, but actually it's a 0.5 to 4.5 range. So a good example is if you have a 0 to 300 pound pressure transducer, the actual voltage to pressure scaling is 0 psi G will equal 0.5 volts. If you pressure the transducer up to full range at 300 pounds, the voltage output will be 4.5 volts. Now, this is how we calibrate it by standard from the factory. But as we know, always, sometimes the pressures drift a little bit or the voltages drift a little bit, and they need calibration from time to time to make them maintain their accuracy over the life of the pressure transducer. Now, before we get started on actually walking you through a procedure on how to calibrate the pressure transducer, I want to be real clear on something. If we have a pressure transducer that is constantly getting out of calibration, meaning it's calibrated one day and the next day it's off again, more than likely what we have is we have a damaged pressure transducer. Pulsation, fluid shock, etc., those type things can damage any industry standard pressure transducer, and they should probably be replaced at that time. Another thing that can cause a pressure transducer to not read properly is the voltage supply. If the 5 volts that is supplying the pressure transducer, if we have a weak connection or a loose connection somewhere and that voltage we're not getting a true 5 volts to that pressure transducer, that can cause the pressure transducer to read low. Likewise, that ground wire is very important. The ground wire puts a permanent load on the pressure transducer to where as the actual pressures change and the signal voltage out, the variable signal voltage changes, we have a completed circuit with the black wire to put a load onto that circuit. If the ground wire connection becomes jeopardized, or a weak ground, or a lot of positive backfeeding voltage comes in from some transient stray source, that can actually make the reading go high. So we want to always check the electrical connections to a pressure transducer before we start calibrating. The worst thing we can do is calibrate something to make up for a loose wiring connection. But if we've verified that we have a good 5 volt supply to our pressure transducer, and we've verified that we have a good ground to our pressure transducer, then it's safe to proceed with this procedure. So what I've done is I've connected to a DE-3000, and I'm going to back out of this just for a moment so you can see the main home screen of the DE-3000 terminal program, and I am connected to one, and I'm going to click this calibrate button. It takes a moment to refresh, and it starts out at channel 1. Now you can select any channel you want, but I happen to want to look at channel 1. It tells me the sensor selection is a 0 to 50. It tells me that I have it scaled as a PSIG. and it's showing the current value of a 1.4. Now down here in the bottom, it also tells me that the sensor range is 0 psi equals 0.5 voltage. Tells me for the high range, 50 psi equals 4.5 volts. So what I've done is I have measured the voltage that's coming into the channel, and when I recorded it, it was feeding me back a voltage of 0.619. Now I actually did that right at the channel. I'll do my best to show you. So I came right in here, but on channel 1, and just measure the voltage between the white wire coming into the terminal board and the black wire. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to click in this cell and I'm going to highlight all the numbers past the decimal place. And I'm going to enter in 619. And then I'm going to push accept. And it takes a moment to refresh. But you'll see that my pressure reading just returned to 0. Now we can do the same thing for the high side. So if we have a way to simulate a steady pressure, there's several different products on the market. Some people will use hydraulic pumps with certified test gauges so they can connect to the pressure transducer and pump the pressure up to full range, in this case 50 psi, and then they can measure their voltage, and then they can adjust and calibrate their high side as well. Works the same way as the demonstration for the low side. Again, if you're having to do this constantly, more than likely we either have a loose wiring connection or a faulty, damaged pressure transducer, and we should change that. But from time to time, it's very important, especially on DOT type locations, to calibrate pressure transducers. And this is a perfectly acceptable method. There's another way to do a low tweak method, calibration method, through the DE-3000 terminal or display unit through the keypad, but I don't really recommend that. This is the preferred method, and it's worked out really good for me over the years. If there's multiple channels to do, once you've calibrated your first channel, you can just simply come to the top and select the other channel that you would like to calibrate. Now this one is hooked to a simulator, so I have a higher voltage dialed in, obviously right now, so a higher reading. And I'm not going to proceed with this, but I just wanted to show you how you can toggle between multiple channels to where you can calibrate all your channels in one-step process. Once you're completed with your calibration procedure, you can simply exit and you're done. Now those calibrations will always stay inside the DE-3000, even if you pull programs out and update programs and dump programs in. If you ever need to wipe or restore calibrations back to default, you can do that. The best way to do it is to actually load a blank program in the DE-3000 and then load your original program back into it. We'll cover that step in more videos. Thank you for your time. If you have any questions, you can email me at john.nance@herbiger.com. Thank you and have a great day.